When AI is layered in broken workflows, it's not fixing them, it's locking them in.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters. Fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. Today's episode is for anyone who's exhausted by AI hype and worried they're still behind. AI isn't going to show up in higher ed the way the keynotes promised. It's going to sneak in through workflows, staffing gaps, and decisions we didn't redesign fast enough. The difference between institutions that planned for that shift and those that didn't will be impossible to ignore in 2026. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Claire Brady, president of Glass Half Full Consulting. Over the last 3 years, Claire has worked with more than 100 colleges and universities on AI strategy across enrollment, student affairs, and leadership, focusing on what actually works, not just what looks good on a slide deck. Claire, welcome to the Pulse.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
So you just told me about a new book that is coming out this year.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. What are you writing about?
I'm so excited. I travel to about 50 campuses a year, and in those travels, people always say to me, do you have a book? And I always say, well, it's AI. How can I write a book? And what I figured out pretty quickly is the technology might not be evergreen, but the skills you need to lead it effectively with the human in the driver's seat in an ethical and responsible way, those skills are evergreen. And so I do have a book coming out this spring called AI with Intention, the leadership guide for higher education. I am so excited to get it into people's hands and so that they can start using it right away.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I don't know that anybody has been on as many campuses doing this type of work that, as you. And so who better to write a book like this?
Thank you.
That's incredible, Claire. I look forward to buying it and having you back on the Pulse later this year so we can talk about it. All right. So listeners, let's get into the topic today. For the last 2 years, higher ed has talked about AI like a tool to pilot, a policy to draft, or a chatbot to deploy, but that framing is already outdated. In her recent work on how AI will actually show up in higher ed this year, Claire's point is simple. The real AI change is not coming with a rollout plan. It's coming and showing up when advising offices are understaffed or inboxes are overflowing, when leaders have to decide how work gets done when hiring is no longer an option. Across higher ed, we're already seeing this shift. AI is being used to speed up content and automate responses, scaling communication, but often faster than institutions are redesigning the systems underneath that work. The danger here is misalignment, and when AI is layered in broken workflows, it's not fixing them, it's locking them in. Claire argues that the real divide won't be between schools that use AI and schools that don't. It will be between institutions that treated AI as a strategic choice and those that treated it as a pressure valve. The former invests in governance, role, clarity, and change management, and the latter optimize for speed and just hope that culture catches up. So today's conversation was all based off of an Instagram post that I saw a couple weeks ago from Claire. She has a great article about all of this, which we are linking into the show notes, but we are going to dissect this all today. Claire, let's start here. You've said the way higher ed talks about AI is already behind the way it's being used. So what's the biggest mismatch that you're seeing right now between leadership narratives and the on-the-ground realities?
Such a good question, Mallory. The biggest mismatch is that leadership narratives are still framed around intentional adoption, while the reality on campus is unintentional integration. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Leaders are talking about pilots, task forces, and approval processes, as if AI is something that arrives when we invite it in. But in practice, AI is already embedded in daily work because people are overwhelmed, under-resourced, and just trying to get through the day. Staff are using it to draft communications, summarize case notes. Students are using it as a study partner, a planner, a second reader. Faculty are using it to manage feedback and workload. So what's behind isn't awareness, it's governance and readiness. Institutions are trying to control use rather than shape the norms around use. That creates uneven access, unclear expectations, and quiet risk. The real danger isn't rogue usage. It's that people are making consequential decisions with AI support without a shared understanding, without guardrails, and without real accountability.
Yeah. I talked to Gil back in 2025 about this idea of rogue usage. Like, staff are not waiting for someone on high to hand them, the keys to ChatGPT. They are going and paying for ChatGPT and just using it. Exactly. It's on our phones. That's it. And so it's like, what do you expect? Top down versus bottom up, like one of those is going to work and one isn't.
And in reality, it's really wonderful. So many institutions are purchasing enterprise level licenses for their folks. But, I always say that there's a lot of things in your kitchen that can cut fruit, right? A blender will do it one way and a knife will do it another. And so when you only give folks a blender, they are going to find ways to go out and find more specialized tools. And they often do that on their own dime and using their own device.
Yeah, especially when they're feeling the pressure from, fewer staff around them, people, headcounts not being replaced, and the workload is only increasing. And at the end of the day, we're looking out for number one. Like, we want to prevent our own burnout or our team's burnout. And that's where, waiting for that permission, we're just leapfrogging it. One of the most striking ideas in your article is that AI is not going to arrive as transformation. It's going to arrive as default behavior. And I think we're talking about that right now, right? So where are you already seeing AI become the default on campuses, whether or not the leadership intended for it?
We're seeing AI become default in low visibility, high volume work, the places leaders often don't see until patterns are really entrenched. Drafting emails is a big one. Planning schedules, summarizing meetings, translating complex information into student-friendly language, or complex processes or steps to enrollment might be a great example. These aren't flashy use cases, but they're shaping how the work gets done. So for students, AI is already functioning as a shadow infrastructure, helping them decode institutional language, organize tasks, and manage cognitive load. So whether institutions acknowledge it or not, AI is already influencing access and persistence. That's why framing AI as an initiative really misses the point for me. Default behaviors form first. Leadership's responsibility is to notice them early and decide which ones align with their mission and which ones need intervention.
And you also talk and warn against automating the wrong things. And I think these two things are connected. Like all those default behaviors, all the examples that you just gave, if we automate and speed up all of that without fixing the issues and the systems underneath it, we just lock in bad processes. So I'm curious, because you have worked with so many schools, what's like a real example of this that you've experienced where AI sped things up, but also now we're stuck in this process that does not really support us?
I feel like you can't go to a higher ed website or maybe even a non-higher ed website without a chatbot popping up and asking you to talk to you.
Yes. The era of AI chatbots. We are in it.
We are in it. We are deep in it. And, and I love a lot of them and a lot of them do a great job. But chatbots in student-facing offices are to me the clearest example of what you just asked about. Financial aid and advising are already complex, fragmented, and emotionally charged systems. So when institutions layer AI on top of that without fixing the underlying process, they don't reduce friction, they actually scale it. So students may get faster responses, but not clearer ones. Or worse, inconsistent or inaccurate information that feels authoritative because it's automated. That erodes trust really quickly. So AI is very good at revealing where systems are broken. If leaders don't pause to redesign workflows, automation, it really just fossilizes the dysfunction, right? Speed without clarity doesn't improve service, it magnifies harm. And if I can, Mallory, I'd love to give you an example of one of my recent clients that had a chatbot. It was getting really great scores from students, like a 4.2 out of 5 or something, which for a launch of a pilot product is really good. The feedback from the majority of students was really good. But what they found is when they disaggregated the data, first generation students were coming back time and time again, asking the same question over and over again, because the system was built in a way that assumed a level of knowledge they didn't have yet. And so that institution made the decision to pause and to say, we're going to do no more harm, right? We don't really care if it's helping the vast majority of people right now. It's hurting this very specific population of students. We're going to pause. They brought in staff and faculty who had experience working with first-gen students. They brought first-gen students in, and they redesigned portions of that chatbot and then redeployed. And that has actually become their default process now for any technology integration, is to slow down the pilot, slow down the initial integration, and bring people most impacted by the tool into the room earlier on to avoid that problem moving forward. And so I think that's a great example of an institution that's really becoming more seasoned and more nuanced in how they do these AI rollouts.
Hey folks, if you want to stop talking about AI and start using it for real results in higher ed, you've got to check out the AI Engage Summit brought to you by Element 451, happening online February 10th and 11th. This isn't another snooze fest webinar. It's packed with practical tools, jaw-dropping insights, live demos, and strategies you can plug into your work immediately. Leaders are coming together to decode how AI can boost engagement, personalize student experiences, and transform workflows. Did I mention it's free and completely virtual? Head over to element451.com or check out the link in the show notes and snag your spot. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, sometimes we do have to slow down to speed up. And I love that example because I think it's easy to default, like when you're using a chatbot product or, even just any generative AI tool to help create content. It's easy to default and be like, oh, well, this system has access to, oodles of information, so it must have what it needs. And in this case, the humans that are the subject matter experts, we're not in that process.
And if they hadn't taken the time, Mallory, to go in and disaggregate the data and look at who was coming back time and time again, because we move so fast, right?
Right.
Pilots become institutionally normed so quickly.
Absolutely. And you just see that, it's a 4.2 out of 5. It must be good. I'm going to move on to the next.
Exactly.
But whoever paused to stop and ask those questions, give them a raise. Well done.
Well done.
Yeah, right. So we've talked about staffing shortages, but I do want to circle back to that because I think a real promise and probably the thing I have personally been impacted by the most is the fact that AI and generative AI helps create capacity. And at Element 451, I ran a small marketing team, and we would have never been able to accomplish the quantity and quality of output had we not had those generative AI tools. Now, we had them very well trained, but they were absolutely creating capacity for our team. But I can thank the CEO for that, right? It was a top-down strategy. So again, I would love to hear another story or example where, you've seen one of your client institutions actually be able to tell the difference between using AI to create capacity versus just papering over burnout. And, what was implemented and what were some of the lessons there?
Sure. This is almost a daily thing that's happening as I visit campuses, because often I'll sit in my kind of pre-visit meeting and they'll tell me, here are all the issues we're dealing with. And then I get to campus and I sit down with the folks doing the work, and their list is vastly different. Things like, you're going to laugh at this, Mallory, admins will tell me they spend half their day trying to schedule meetings.
They probably do.
Right? And I'm like, schedule meetings? We have products for that. Why would that be the case, right? And they'll say, well, because so-and-so puts their kid's soccer game in and so-and-so likes to go for a walk and so-and-so puts their project work in. And I said, oh, that's a human problem, not an AI problem, right? And so one of the greatest pieces of advice I give any leader is you have a list. I understand you have a list, but your list, to be real, is not the list. You need to go sit and shadow an academic advisor for an entire day. And for a leader to do that is a major commitment, but I will tell you it pays off. What you'll notice when you sit with an academic advisor, and this is a broad brush I'm painting here, is they're logging into probably a half a dozen systems throughout the day. The systems are not talking to each other. Before they meet with a student, they have to get a snapshot of the student, and it's not like a medical record. It's not all in one place, right? They have to go to multiple systems. And then when the student comes in, they have to perform immediately to whatever the student is bringing forward, right? And so there's a level of nuance and sophistication that's required to understand where the student is coming from and then how to guide them into the, whatever their questions might be. And so when you sit next to an advisor and realize that, you could tell them, go use ChatGPT or go use a custom GPT or, go use any of these products, they don't have those seconds even, right, in that moment. And so, how do you build time in their schedule to build the sandboxes? How do you ensure that the tools they're using are integrated and have interoperability and are leveraging the strengths, right? If we literally had a CRM and an LMS, I'm using all the acronyms in higher ed, right? And an
I think
SIS,
listeners know them, though.
right? They know them. And an SIS that were talking to each other, just those three things. A CRM, an SIS, and an LMS talking to each other and leveraging their data, higher ed would be revolutionized tomorrow, right? Tomorrow, this would happen. So if you're listening and you're a programmer, this is where you need to head next, right? And so this idea that they don't have the time or the luxury to be going to a seventh or eighth tool throughout their day, right? Everything needs to be integrated. Everything needs to be easy and at their fingertips and automated. And that's where I spend a lot of time on campuses talking to folks is, yes, you have the capacity to use this generative AI tool to do X, Y, and Z, but then that still requires you to show up to work that day and do X, Y, and Z, which is just a fancy replacement for that Excel spreadsheet you were using last week to do that same thing, right? And so really taking the time and having the cognitive capacity to build the automations and the systems behind it, that's what we need to be giving staff in order to really help with this burnout question. And it is real, friends. It is real. I joke that when I get to campus, the registrar is meeting in my parking spot, right? The registrar team handles so much paper and so many documents, and they're just desperate to get minutes back in their day, let alone hours. And students are waiting. And so then the phone calls are coming in and the questions are coming in and advising is coming in. And so there's so many departments that if we just really focus on the super unsexy stuff, right? But the really important stuff of watching and observing what they do and what has become a normal way of doing the work, I think that's where a lot of institutions would really start a lot of their AI work.
So just listening to you, Claire, it is striking me how AI really touches just absolutely every part of campus, right? Enrollment, student affairs, marketing, IT, HR, registrar, like everybody. And we've already acknowledged sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. But we also know higher ed institutions go really slow sometimes. And we don't want that either, right? Like there's an extreme that we don't want to be crawling. So have you seen or helped institutions implement any governance models that are helping break some of these silos, but also helping the institutions move a little quicker too?
There's two chapters in my book that are going to be really important for folks to read. One is higher ed is different, and that's a good thing. And the other one is about how to design governance beyond the task force. And those two things are really important to balance, right? So think about, we are an organization, a field that really values shared governance. And that means that we need to bring all the people to the table. And that means that we can't have a CEO just announce one day that we're going to do something and then everybody goes along with it, right? And so we have to acknowledge that we are not a corporate environment. We have a different way of working. Some institutions slower, faster, some institutions that has more or less friction. But this idea that we operate in a shared governance kind of environment is really important, right? And the second piece is so many institutions are working on task forces, but they're not thinking beyond the task forces. So the governance models that actually work right now are really principle-based and distributed. They're not heavy, but they're really centralized approval structures. So what I see in institutions doing this well is a small central group that sets shared values, clear risk thresholds, and ethical commitments at an institutional level. They define the guardrails, but they don't micromanage every single decision. The real authority lives closer to the work. Student affairs, enrollment, faculty, communications don't need permission for every experiment, but they do need alignment around what good looks like, what's off limits, and when humans must stay in the loop. So when governance, right?
Yes.
When governance turns into compliance theater, innovation slows to a crawl. People get risk averse, work goes underground, that kind of shadow infrastructure, and nothing really happens. But when governance functions as cultural guidance, institutions actually move faster and more responsibly. And to me, that's, the best way. That's why I say AI governance isn't about control, it's about clarity. When people understand the principles, they don't have to wait. They can act with confidence and competence.
You are consulting with all these institutions. Goodness, I hope you have run into a leader that's handling AI well at this point. Or hopefully more than one. Good. Glad to hear it. What do they have in common? Like, what are they doing differently?
That's a great question, Mallory. They are approaching this as novices. They're not coming in with ego. They understand that this is a different type of transformation than we've seen before, but they also understand that we've done similar things before. So we integrated social media. We integrated the websites, the web, sorry. They also were able to go online overnight at the onset of the pandemic. Like, they have experience doing hard things, but they understand that this hard thing is of a different nature. It's actually more like the iPhone in 2007 than it is like anything else, right? We could not have known in 2007 that, we would go everywhere with a phone in our pocket and that we would have computing power in our pocket that we could never even imagine, that it would become such an integral part of our lives, even at a young age, right? We would never have known that. And so those leaders that are kind of acknowledging the moment, acknowledging and putting their ego aside that they can be a novice at something, and where they are modeling for their people, I had a really great experience. I used it to write my board report, and it really helped me tighten my messaging. But then I used it for this academic paper I was writing, and it did a horrible job. And they're just being really honest and real with their people. They're also doing everything they can to help their people build their AI literacy and their AI fluency. And the difference there to me is AI literacy is really about understanding how the technology works, when you should use it, when you shouldn't use it. And AI fluency is really kind of navigating the real work under the umbrella of AI. And so those two things have to both be nurtured and encouraged, resourced. You need the time. This is all very time intensive. And they're really intentional explorers, is what I would say.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Claire, as we are wrapping up, I've got one more question for you because I always like to fast forward, right? Let's put ourselves in January of 2027. What will be the clearest signal to you that an institution has used AI with intention? And what will be the red flag that tells us that, right, trust was sacrificed for something, maybe speed, but something?
I love this question. And I really sit with this question a lot, right? I wrote this piece about what's happening in 2026, but I'm already thinking 2027 at this point. So by 2027, the clearest signal of intentional AI use won't be sophistication. It'll be transparency and trust. People will know when AI is involved, why it's being used, and most importantly, where humans are still accountable. The red flags to me won't be misuse, it will be silence. When students and staff don't understand how decisions are being made, or when AI is quietly substituted for care instead of used to support student services, student enrollment, student learning, trust will already be eroding in those cases. So by that point, using AI itself will no longer be impressive. It's just something that we all do. It will be assumed. What will matter is how institutions used it, whether they leveraged AI to deepen care, improve clarity, and strengthen accountability, or whether they traded those things for speed and convenience. The institutions that get this right won't just move faster, they'll be trusted, and that will really, in my opinion, be the greatest differentiator.
That's a great note to end on, Claire. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is a great way to kick the year off. I hope folks who are listening are inspired and having these important conversations with leadership, with their peers, with their teams. And to the point you made a few minutes ago, modeling the right behavior, right? Being transparent about it and modeling that good behavior. So thank you. Any final thoughts on this before we wrap up?
Just thank you for being such a strong voice and a believer that we can do this well, and we can do this with intention and ethics and responsibility, and that it's not this runaway train that we're all chasing. We are in the driver's seat. And so I thank you for being a big voice in a lot of that messaging too, Mallory.
Thanks, Claire. All right, folks, this was, they always go by so quickly, but this one just sped right by. I look forward to these next couple episodes. We are going to be continuing to talk about agentic AI. We're even going to be talking about what a fractional CMO is and whether or not higher ed needs one. So folks, get excited. These next couple episodes are going to be great. And Claire, we just appreciate your time again. All right, folks, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.